Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Harry Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Encore Business Group, and Rydan Investments.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.
Happy you could join us on the last day of March here and National Tater Day. So hopefully you're having some form of potatoes here for dinner, or maybe I'm cueing you into having some. I think I'm blowing people away in the studio here. We've got new headphones in the studio, and apparently I'm talking too loud already. So we're coming through loud and clear. Hopefully we are to you guys here. Messages are coming in from the field too, because I've been hearing from Rex more, and I think his current mission has gone sideways. So I'm hoping to have an update by the end of the show. Because he's been trying to make it back here, but that hasn't been going well. So hopefully we'll have an update there. But we're going to bring on Tyler Rucker, who's going to update us on everything basketball. He works for No Ceilings. I really like all the stuff that they do. They cover prospects very well, and I figured he'd be a good one to cover the tournament here. Michigan State's out. Michigan's out, unfortunately. So we can talk about prospects as a whole, and I feel like we'll maybe talk Pistons Timberwolves for a particular reason. But welcome to the show, Tyler.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm happy to be back on. It's an exciting time of the year for basketball fans.
Yeah, you guys do a great job covering the prospects, and this is where the rubber kind of meets the road, because we're going into bonus time with the college guys, and then in a few months we're gonna see a lot of these guys on the big league rosters. So I figured I would start there. We've got all chalk in the tournament here, which is interesting. I was kind of feeling like it was going to be more chalky this year. I feel like the transfer portal and some of the NIL stuff has made the bracket chalkier. Is that kind of how you feel? You follow all the prospects very well and all the prospect movement.
Yeah, a little chalk. You know, everyone's been kind of wanting some upsets and a little bit of drama with the tournament, but you know, we've got 4 teams left, and yeah, they're all number 1 seeds, but it's really good matchups. A lot of prospects too, so it's going to be a fun rest of the path. The transfer portal's kind of become a beast lately, you know, and it's kind of taking a little bit of the spotlight, but that's with a lot of these names now. It's kind of how things are looking. You know, guys are trying to go up to play for some more, you know, spotlight and everything. So it's definitely made it a little bit of an interesting curveball with, you know, college basketball and obviously monitoring the draft. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, the transfer portal thing has been interesting to me, especially the argument of, oh, well, we got these guys moving around from team to team, and then you're seeing all the coach movement already. You know, even though some of these guys are just out of the tournament and they're already moving to other teams, so it's not like that hasn't been in existence with the coaches for a long time. But it does seem like it kind of makes it so that the powers are more powerful, because if a guy elevates at one level, elevates his team, then he's going to move up to another team to get that higher visibility. I think I remember reading, I think it was from No Ceilings, you guys did a piece that was talking about, basically, I don't remember the exact title, but it was basically about kind of the biggest difference between the starting point when somebody was recruited from high school and then where they got to by the pros. And I remember Dennis Jenkins of the Pistons being one of the highest kind of value differences there, because he was not a highly touted recruit. Then he started at the lower level, was at Iona, which was talked about a lot because of Patino, and then eventually worked his way up to St. John's. And now I think is a potential future piece for the Pistons. He's a key piece for the Motor City Cruise at the moment, and could factor into the roster here. So it is fun to see these guys from the beginning, because, yeah, they might not be playing against the best competition, but there's guys of interest at every level, and then you kind of see them go to the top by the end of their careers here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Dennis is one of those players that, you know, that's what we try to do at No Ceilings, is kind of give spotlights from guys that, you know, obviously everyone wants to talk about players that are projected in the lottery or, you know, are McDonald's All-Americans, but, you know, we've seen time and time again, you know, everyone comes from a different place. You know, everyone starts out at a different spot. So we try to give spotlight to guys that, you know, might have been lower ranked recruits. And Jenkins is one of those guys that kind of, this is what the portal should be, for, is like, hey, okay, I've kind of earned my spot, and now I'm just transferring up to show, scouts and, evaluators that I can, hold my own against stronger competition. Worked out great for him, and I think that's what you're seeing with the portal is, teams are even kind of looking at guys where it's like, hey, you're on your third team in 3 years. That might not necessarily be something they're looking for. It might be something they're considering a little bit of a red flag. So, it's always fascinating too. You see these guys that are young players that you can tell they've been working and grinding because they weren't a well-known recruit coming out of high school. So they play with that chip on their shoulder, and then it carries into the NBA. And, Jenkins looks like someone that, like you said, is going to be around for a long time and be a nice find for the Pistons, hopefully, for the future.
Yeah, I've liked his play so far, and I think that's a good point as far as the chip on the shoulder thing goes, because I was watching the UFL yesterday in preparation for the last segment of the show where we're talking to a guy that covers everything UFL, and they were talking about how those guys are all playing for a spot, so they're easy guys to coach because they have a lot of motivation because they're trying to get to the next level. That's true for a lot of the guys in college that are saying, hey, I need to elevate my level, not only my game, but my level, so that my game can elevate and be seen on a different level. So, yeah, it's interesting. But I do want to talk about some of the prospects here that are still left, and doesn't have to be ones that are still in the tournament, but just some of the guys that have caught your eye. Obviously, we've got some big names like the Cooper Flags of the world that we know about, but who are some of the guys that you feel like have risen the most through this, kind of had their stock go up the most through the tournament process?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. Everyone always wants to talk about Cooper Flag, and he is fantastic. A lot of those Duke prospects are going to be names to kind of keep an eye on moving forward. Obviously, they're projected to probably be somewhere in the top 10, but I think Con Knipple especially is, kind of started to trend in the right direction. Just a smart player that can really be a lethal floor spacer. Not the greatest athlete in the world, but he's tough. He's got good size and really, really smart off the ball, knows where to find his spots. And then there's a couple players with Florida that are starting to make some noise. Walter Clayton Jr. is an older point guard, but just one of those guys that, when it gets down to crunch time, he seems to find another level with his game and really take over. So a lot of exciting players still left in this class. Maybe not on these other teams. It might not be players projected to be in the lottery, but players that this is going to be a fun class. This is a really deep class, and it's going to have a lot of value all over the place.
Yeah, Knipple is interesting to me because obviously, like you said, the attention is going to Flag, and that makes sense. It's reasonable. He's the guy with probably the highest ceiling per your name of your outfit, but Knipple does seem he's got kind of a throwback game that I feel like would be somewhat underrated but transfer well to the NBA, because we're seeing this kind of strange trend here where we're having some of the most athletic guys ever get to the league, guys like Giannis and Wemby. These are, athletic dynamos here. But then you also have the Jokic's and the Doncic's of the world, where they're not necessarily the peak of athleticism, but they've honed their games to a degree where they make up for what may be athletic deficiencies and are in kind of the same category as those other two. And so that's kind of interesting. I feel like that's kind of Flag and Knipple. Flag has got the athletic prowess, and that's clear, and he's got a lot of skill to his game, but I like what Knipple can do, like you said, stretching the floor, and he just seems to be a hard-nosed guy that would transfer well to the NBA.
Absolutely, and I think there's in the past we've seen so many drafts where teams picking high are still swinging for the upside, and completely understand, because usually you're wanting to swing for the All-Stars and whatnot. But I think there's always each year it seems to kind of different, where teams are kind of now leaning towards like, hey, we might chase the higher floor guys, the guys that we think they might not be all NBA guys, but they could help this team push the needle forward and take that next step. I think Khan's one of those players that people were a little buzzing about earlier in the year, and you kind of look just because Cooper Flagg was kind of getting all the attention. Then all of a sudden you looked and you're like, hey, he's shooting 50, 40, 90 and being efficient and playing smart basketball. So as the year has gone on, he's starting to buzz again. He's had some good games in the tournament, and I think it's just one of those players that teams that feel like they're close to getting to that playoff contention might be looking at Con as like, hey, this is a missing ingredient in the kitchen. I think speaking about Michigan and everything, I think Danny Wolf's one of those guys that a lot of teams are very intrigued with. Kind of an eye of the beholder prospects, but I mean, you watch his film and you start getting really excited about a player of that size with guard-like skills. Like, we always throw around the unicorn term, and yes, it's not specifically for Danny Wolf of being like an all-NBA guy, but he has unicorn-like ability with, guard skills for a big man that size. So there's a lot of intrigue with this class all over the place.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Wolf. I wanted to talk about some of the Michigan and Michigan State prospects and Big Ten prospects as a whole. But Wolf is interesting to me because he's clearly got a lot of skill, but this is something that I normally reserve for football players. I feel like it happens with quarterbacks, but it seems to be the case to me for Wolf, which is there are some quarterbacks that it's almost like they're too talented. They can run, they can pass on the run, they can do too many things. So sometimes there's too many options open for them. Whereas when you have like a Tom Brady, he's not going to run. He's just going to sit in the pocket and pick you apart. So he doesn't have any other options to think about. He's just going through his progressions. He's not trying to do the running around in circles and throw it. That's what I kind of feel like with Wolf's game, where it's almost too expansive right now. He can do so many things that sometimes there's too much on his mind, and then he makes an errant pass because he's pressing too much. Whereas in the NBA, that might get distilled down a little bit, and the fact that he's multi-skilled, multi-talented will be an advantage for sure, but he won't necessarily have as much on his plate, because when they kind of took his load away as far as his workload and the idea that he wouldn't have to bring the ball up the floor as much, they clearly made some of those adjustments and just said, okay, we'll give you the ball in the mid post here, and then you've got a lot of options. You can run, the double big man stuff with Golden, which he could do in the NBA. I feel like a lot of that will transfer, especially because he's not going to be asked to do as much, but can do that stuff at times.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. It's always one of those things when we're evaluating, it's like, hey, you also got to take in the situation they're in right now. And I think Danny did so many different things for that Michigan team. Like, yes, he had some games where you're like, okay, the turnovers need to get loaded up, but he is also one of those players, they run everything through. So you're thinking in theory, hey, at the next level, things might get watered down, and he might be even more dangerous, more efficient. NBA spacing, a little bit more better shooting around him. He's definitely one of those prospects. Right now, you kind of look at the board and the draft, and you're like, Danny could go anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if a team's just in love with him and he goes, late lottery, or he could go a little bit later, where if he slipped out of that lottery, then you're getting into some playoff teams where they're like, hey, adding Danny Wolf to the mix might really make this thing get interesting for our team. So he's going to be one of those prospects, and I'm really interested to see throughout that pre-draft process, because you talk to some teams are just absolutely in love with them. Some teams are like, oh, I'm just trying to figure out how it's going to fit. But, myself, I watch his tape, and I'm like, man, just draft this guy. Just get him in the mix, because he does so many things on the court that, you don't see often with a player of his size and measurables, and it just gives you kind of an advantage on the offensive side of the ball for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I want to come back and talk about Wolf a little bit more. We got to take a brief break, but I want to talk more about some of these Michigan and Michigan State prospects. But great stuff from Tyler so far. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Tyler Rucker of No Ceilings. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting discussion about Wolf, because you talked about all his skills on the offensive end, and one thing that's tough for some of these guys that are more offensive minded, which is true for a lot of players, he does actually, I don't think he'll serve as a defensive liability, even though there's not high end foot speed or anything like that, but he was kind of a force on defense and on the boards, which will transfer well to the NBA as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think, that's one of the things with Danny is, you kind of get some people like, hey, I'm wondering about the defensive side of the ball. And, I kind of evaluated him. I was like, Danny, if you got him at the next level, he's a great shot blocker. He's smart off the ball. Also, how many big men of his size are you really being like, oh, man, a lead on the perimeter? You just don't see that. So you're drafting Danny for what he can do offensively, and offensively, teams are going to be looking at him as like, hey, this could be an advantage with, what we could do, the versatility, especially if, I look at a team like the Thunder, if they could add a Danny Wolf to the mix, like that's a dangerous, recipe. So I think a lot of teams are going to be intrigued with kind of what he could bring to the table, and definitely would make a coaching staff happy with what he can do as a playmaker and his vision and his feel for the game.
Well, especially because, we're talking about how well his skill set transfers to the NBA, but I feel like if there's two criticisms or two alterations I could see being made in his game, we already talked about one, which is kind of, like you said, distilling things down and making it so that he's not doing so many things because he wouldn't have as much to do probably on, especially if he was drafted a little later by a team like Oklahoma City or one of the better teams where he's just got to fit in and be part of the team. The other part that seemed obvious to me in his game is he's obviously a good outside shooter, but he seemed to prefer taking the shot off the dribble. But to me, he looks like a better catch and shoot shooter. I haven't looked at the numbers there. He doesn't catch and shoot hardly at all. So it's hard to get a real number base there. But I feel like that's one thing that I could see people changing in the NBA as well, saying, hey, you're not going to handle the ball quite as much, but if a guard drives and you're outside, then take it. Don't try to dribble around and dribble yourself into a worse shot. Take the catch and shoot three.
Right, absolutely. And I think that will come down to like the next fit with kind of what the roster construction looks like. I mentioned the Thunder, but a team even like the Spurs, who have their second pick right now slotted to be like 16, like putting him and Victor Wembanyama together, you get that passing to kind of open things up. But I think with the additional spacing, that will be a coaching staff might be like, hey, Danny, instead kind of stay out here on the perimeter as a pick and pop guy, kind of open things up a little bit. You definitely want to kind of bring out his strengths, but also, not bring back the range too much, but especially with the turnovers and everything. I think, like we talked about before, I think a next fit, their next role will be a little bit watered down, so you're hoping that that'll be more efficient. And I think Danny's got the basketball IQ and awareness on the offensive side of the ball, especially to make that happen.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how he does in the NBA. I'm curious about his front court mate there, because Golden obviously was a big asset at the college level. He's, again, a little bit older, just like Wolf is, and so you can't play the potential game quite as much, which happens a lot in the draft. Mm-hmm. But with his ability, he didn't do it much, but he showed it enough, his ability to step out. I remember that being the case with Hunter Dickinson when he was at Michigan, and he's still in college somehow. I'm not sure. I think he's now older than me. I don't know how he's still in college, but Golden showed the ability to step out, and I feel like that's got to make that appealing at the NBA level. He's got the defensive capabilities, he's got the rebounding, he's got the inside stuff, but often big guys need that other piece, and he's got a nice looking shot from the outside.
Yeah, it's funny because you see these prospects every year that come in and out that are making some noise. Danny's coming from Yale, transferred to Michigan, and you start evaluating those guys, and then all of a sudden other names start popping up all the time. And Vlad was one of those names that, when I was evaluating Danny, I was like, man, this guy can play. He can do some good stuff. And, I know he's a little bit older, but he's got good size. He's around 7'1". He's a big body. See some toughness around the basket, some good touch. So at some point of the draft, I think teams are always looking for, like, hey, we need a big off the bench. We need some toughness. We need some size. And I think you're going to know what you get with him. I think definitely a team's going to be interested to kind of take an extended look, especially nowadays with like the salary cap really coming into the picture with the NBA. Teams are trying to find, value wherever they can of guys that could helped them. And Dennis Jenkins, as we talked about before, there's always value with the draft. Even if you're not drafted, teams are very aggressive with trying to find guys that could be two-way players and then all of a sudden earn a role on the roster. So I think Vlad will be one of those names you're looking into, because you get the toughness, you get kind of the nastiness around the basket, and then he has shown some touch from outside. So I think this is a player that, going back to when he was at FAU, he kept getting better, and that's what you want to see with your an NBA team. And I think he'll definitely draw some attention, and we'd like to say get a cup of coffee at least in the NBA. I think Vlad will get a cup of coffee for sure.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I want to switch to Michigan State though here, because one guy now I've been seeing him mentioned more, and granted he started on the bench and everything, but I'm surprised that Jace Richardson was a little bit under the radar to start the season seemingly, and then obviously he busted onto everybody's radar here. And as a freshman, I mean, he showed a lot of maturity. He's got a great skill set. He doesn't have the same height that his dad did, but he does seem to have a different game that should transfer pretty well. I have to imagine he's kind of rising up the draft charts here.
Yeah, Jace has been buzzing lately. Like you said, kind of was coming off the bench earlier in the year and was very efficient. So I feel like myself and evaluators and scouts around the league were kind of waiting to see, like, okay, what's this going to look like when the minutes start to climb? And then, he got a couple starts and a couple rough performances. So you're like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden it just exploded. And you're like, oh, here we go. So Jace has been really interesting. He's one of those prospects you kind of ask around, and everyone's trying to buy in. Everyone's trying to be like, okay, like I'm trying to drink the Kool-Aid as well. But I think a lot of scouts that you talk to around the league are still trying to get like an accurate range of like, hey, where could Jace be coming off the board? Where do you have him? So I know a lot of scouts in the industry have had him, in the lottery. Some see him a little bit later, but I think he's the name that scouts are going to be so fascinated throughout the pre-draft process to get, him in for workouts, get an extended look. Just a smart player on the court. Really does a lot of good stuff. You can tell his dad taught him well, and he just does a lot of things that NBA teams are looking for. So I think Jason's going to be really interesting. He's one of these prospects that teams are always looking for to kind of get these players that seem like such a smart, easy fit with their roster. He'll definitely have a lot of fans.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and obviously the name piece and playing for his dad's alma mater is a big part of that. It was fun seeing the nostalgia during the tournament of Izzo coaching both of those guys. But I want to finish here on guys that have already made it to the pros here, because obviously one of the biggest surprises in the league is how the Pistons have done this year. They officially tripled their win total from last year, which has never been done in the NBA. And I'm curious what you think, because a lot of these guys you would have scouted on their way to the NBA. Holland, Duren, the majority of their roster is younger, aside from the veterans that they kind of layered in the offseason. So what do you think of some of these young guys? I feel like there's been early returns on Holland. The Thompson brothers are playing very well. The other one is in Houston. But what do you think of these young Pistons here?
Yeah, it's a joy for, myself and everyone at No Ceilings. This is like our dream, because a team that invested in building through the draft, and now you're starting to see all the pieces come together, and they have such a high ceiling moving forward. It's been really fun to watch this Pistons team, and I think they're starting to build a little bit of an identity, of this toughness, this young team that's not afraid of any other team, and usually don't see the pieces come together that quickly. So that's where you have something special with a team like Detroit. It's something that you can keep pushing forward with, letting this talent just continue to develop. And I know I'm very excited to see what they could do in postseason time. It's always interesting too when you get like when they hired J.B. Bickerstaff. I thought it was fantastic, because I thought that he was going to be able to kind of get the young talent to buy in, and sometimes you just need a fresh voice. And Kate Cunningham obviously has been sensational this year, but you're seeing, guys like Ron Holland pitching in, and Asar Thompson, I'm still a huge fan of, and then Jalen Duren's had a great year too. So I think it's great to see them, getting results in the win column, building confidence for this whole team. And confidence is so important with young players and young teams in general. So now it's like, okay, the pieces were right. We just needed to kind of get everybody on the right track, and Detroit's going to be a fun team now. It's fun when you see all of a sudden kind of a team's rebuild or their process of like, hey, we're trying to take that next leap. Well, Detroit's taken 2 huge leaps forward this year, and now you get to have some real fun moving forward and thinking about like, okay, we have an identity now. How do we build around that identity and continue to push the needle forward?
Yeah, and if they end up playing the Pacers, which is kind of looking like what it's going to be, that series is going to be crazy because that was a heated rivalry this year, and they're clearly getting to a fever pitch here headed to the playoffs. So should be fun to watch. Appreciate you talking about the local prospects and stuff, and we'll definitely follow your coverage. Tell people where they can find you here.
Yeah, but NoCeilingsNBA.com. We've got a talented team of analysts that scout the draft all year and young talent around the NBA. So I appreciate you guys having me on, as always.
Definitely. We'll plan to have you on as we prepare for the NBA draft here, because that should be fun to talk that over with you this year. Didn't get a chance to do that because we debuted after the draft last year. But we'll have you back on, and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Tyler. All right, thanks to Tyler Rucker. Appreciate him coming on and covering the prospects here. We're going to switch our attention to baseball because it's getting to be, it was opening day for the Tigers here, but it's going to be opening day for the Whitecaps here this week. So we're going to have Dan Hasty, the play-by-play guy for the Whitecaps, take us through the upcoming season. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. We're happy to introduce Dan Hasty. He is the play-by-play guy for the Whitecaps, and I think I would spend too long in the intro naming all of your other active things, Dan. So you're going to have to help me out with all your hats that you wear, because it's seemingly a lot of them.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Ryan. And, now that we're coming into summer, I'm just very grateful that I really only have one main thing, and that is, of course, the West Michigan Whitecaps. So it's nice. It's less to keep track of, and I'm happy about it.
Well, I don't know what it is with you guys that are the play-by-play guys for the minor leagues, because we're friends on the show with Greg Gagne, and his schedule is always crazy whenever he's trying to come on the show. I know he bounces back and forth to the Tigers broadcast as well, but he's got a lot of irons in the fire. You guys just can't get enough of doing this. But you're also, you do the Rise and Detroit Mercy too, right? But that's just other seasons.
Correct. And so the Rise, who are now in their second season, that season's actually still going. And then after that, you're right, Detroit Mercy basketball, and then as of the last couple of months, the Grand Rapids Gold. So that's been a lot of fun. Really, really love the job that those guys do.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't realize you were doing the Gold. That's got to be fun. We talked to Chad Bush recently, who does the Motor City Cruise, and that's always interesting to me, that level. I feel like there's a nice level of excitement there, adding that play-by-play element in. But yeah, that's wild. It's funny because I've known one of your predecessors, Rick Berkey, for a long time, and he's got the same problem. He's always doing a million things. You guys just can't get enough of this here, and that's fun that we're seeing you in different places.
Well, that's the fun of it. I mean, it beats working. And look, I mean, when you're able to put on a headset and talk about whether it be baseball or basketball or volleyball, you get to be one with everyone who's in the arena or in the stadium or at the court all day long, or even for those couple of hours. So, it does really allow you to just tune out the outside world and really just be present, which, in a world of cell phones and all that stuff, it's kind of fun to be able to get away from all that and just experience it.
Oh yeah, and that's a great ballpark to hang out in. It's definitely a nice part of the sports scene here in Grand Rapids. I'm excited to get out to a game. While I was getting ready to interview you, I was checking out the menu for this year. It seems like there's a lot of additions. I might go back to that here later in the interview, but I was also looking at your website, and I like that you are able to be a little bit more relaxed at that level. I feel like that's happening in the Tigers broadcast as a whole. I'm a big fan of the Tigers broadcasting team that you're a part of, because I feel like they've got a lot of talent on that roster. And I want to talk to you about that viral moment that you had there where you did the Jim Nance impersonation, because that was pretty dead on. You had to work on that for a while.
I wish I could say I spent any time on it whatsoever. It was just simply looking at Nate Wangler, who's been in the broadcast booth with me now since he's going back as far as 2018, and saying, hey, the Masters, because I believe that particular year, the Masters had essentially a rain out on one of the days. So as that was all happening, it kind of did us a huge favor, because then they played the last round of the Masters on the Monday rather than on the Sunday. So that was a Sunday afternoon game. And that's when we just decided, the night before, just to, hey, what if we did that? And so we tried it. It was fun. And thankfully, the good people in Augusta enjoyed it as well, because those guys, they would have shot that down real quick had they thought otherwise.
Yeah, that was cool. Check that out. Any listeners that haven't heard that, it's on Dan's website, danhasty.com. I'm sure it's in a bunch of other places, but it was a cool moment, and it was well done. So hopefully, do you guys have anything planned like that for this year here? You need a follow-up bit for that.
Well, we had a chance last year. We passed on it. We just didn't want to be, those people who just do it every single year. But we'll see. We got a bunch of stuff. We're always thinking about stuff like that, and just what kind of cool and different thing we can do, because, there's 140 different minor league baseball teams. So, what we can do to be different, to be unique, is kind of our jam. So, we like to be able to do cool stuff like that. So, but not necessarily just continue to play the hit. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, you've got to have a new bit, but maybe a derivation of the last bit. Maybe we can do some brainstorming at some point. But yeah, I get what you mean there. But yeah, you guys do a good job keeping it fresh and everything, because it is such a fan-friendly experience from top to bottom with the Whitecaps and with that entire experience. I want to know, though, you're seeing these guys day in and day out. Obviously it's built on the fan experience, but you guys have a killer roster to start the season. You've got to be pretty excited about some of these guys that are on the opening day roster for you.
We haven't been able to announce the opening day roster, so I really can't get into specifics on that.
Okay.
I mean, I can certainly talk about some of the guys that I were here last year. I can tell you that I think it's a pretty safe bet that some of the guys that were here at the end of last season have a good chance to be back once again. And that's a team that got momentum as the season went on. They got better as the year went on. Their manager, Tony Capicelli, who was in his first season, he also got more in his rhythm as the season went on, and they really took off. They missed the postseason by just a couple of games. And, looking at the roster right now, there is a real – there are some dudes. There are some absolute dudes on that team. And, with the way that they have developed pitching from top to bottom throughout that organization, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it almost feels like the names are inconsequential. It's just that no matter who shows up, they are getting every ounce of toothpaste out of the tube when it comes to their pitching. And they just have that side of the coin figured out. So, we think we're getting some offensive help, and then you just kind of lean into what they can develop organizationally, and I think they've got some potential.
Yeah, well, let me give you a couple names here so we don't get you into trouble, but two of the names that we've been talking about a lot on the show, because the Tigers minor league report guys appear a lot on this show, and two of the names that we're likely to see in West Michigan would be Kevin McGonigal and Max Clark. Those two will be two of the top-rated prospects in all of major leagues, And I know we were talking pitching, but those will be two nice hitters that we could potentially see here in town.
Well, I can tell you this, whether it's Max Clark or Kevin McGonigal or whoever ends up showing up in West Mich, they're going to be thrilled when they see the ballpark, because over the past 6 months, so much has been done to change LMCU ballpark. It is crazy what has happened and what that place looks like now as compared to what it looked like on the final day of the 2024 season. One of the big things that Major League Baseball wanted to do was to get the bullpens off the field. You know how sometimes there's pitchers warming up down the right and left field line, and they've got to stick some random pitcher in front of them so they don't get smoked by a foul ball? Well, Major League Baseball wants that to be off. They want that to be no more. So basically, among the other things that Major League Baseball had been asking, we just decided to take it a step farther and really modernize the entire ballpark. So, it's already been around for over 30 years, and now these changes make it feel like a completely new ballpark. And it's a ballpark that they can stay in for another 30 years. And one of the things about taking the bullpens off the field is that you got to put them somewhere. So what's happening is they're putting them just beyond the right center field wall, basically, kind of like one next to the other, kind of like what they do at Comerica Park. So what that allows is you had to make space for it. Well, our ballpark's always been a pitcher's park. So what did they do? They moved the fences in, finally. What was the hardest ballpark to hit a home run in all of minor league baseball has gotten the adjustment that I think everybody's been waiting for.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be a welcome addition to all the hitters that come through there, because, I do know that was the reputation. I did hear that. I think it was somebody that came on the Sports Project here. They were talking about that. So that's interesting to me, because, that's going to make it more fan-friendly. It already is pretty fan-friendly, but that's exciting to come check that out here. But I want to continue the discussion about the ballpark, and I want to talk to you about some of your influences and some of the people you kind of like to watch here in broadcasting. But we'll come back here with Dan Hasty. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to come back here with Dan Hasty. He's given us an outline of the things to watch out for with the Whitecaps. I want to talk about the food piece here at the end, but I do want to talk to you about you've got a lot of hats, as we discussed. You've been doing a lot of different jobs in broadcasting. Who are some of the people that you either looked up to when you were getting into it, or are people that you kind of study now that you say, hey, these are guys that I maybe try to model my craft after, or take some pieces from? Because obviously you want to have your own style. Authenticity is very important with broadcasting, but who are some of the guys that you kind of like to watch?
Well, when I was young, and I grew up in Metro Detroit, I remember a long time ago, back even before they started asking people, who's your Tiger? I asked my mom, I said, who's yours? And she said, oh, it's Ernie Harwell. And I didn't know who that was. And then I figured out what he did for a living and figured out, that might be easier than becoming a player. So he was the first major influence. But I was too young to really get to know him. I got, I think, a letter from him along the way that was really, really special. And that's actually in a frame somewhere. But nowadays, the cool thing is, having done this for a little bit, I've had a chance to get to know some of the people that a lot of us have the privilege of watching on TV or listening to on radio. One of my favorite influences is Brian Anderson, who is the Milwaukee Brewers TV broadcaster. He also does the NBA on TNT. He does a bunch of cool stuff. He does the NCAA tournament. I believe that's what he's doing over the past weekend. But he is one of my absolute all-time favorites. And to go from having listened to him to learning from him is really, really special. So Brian Anderson, definitely one of my favorites. As it pertains to radio as well as TV, Kevin Harlan is also somebody that has been a really big help in my career. So I can't go without thinking about and at least recognizing two people who, really do make it a point to help younger guys like myself. So those guys mean a lot.
I'm happy to hear that, because you hit on two of my favorites. I love talking broadcasting. We have a lot of broadcasters on the show, and those guys are Harlan. If you had a gun to my head and asked me who my favorite was, Harlan's got to be it. He's so versatile. He does a great job of highlighting the game and highlighting the big moments without taking away from it or being too hyperbolic. And Anderson is so solid. I feel like that name is not brought up enough for all of the things that he does. Like you're talking about, I feel like both those guys obviously do the NBA on TNT coverage, and they're both featured in the NCAA March Madness stuff too. But they've done a good job getting those guys and featuring those guys. But yeah, that's part of the reason we like to talk to broadcasters and talk about broadcasters, because it's nice to put a name here to the voice that we hear. Because I say this a decent amount on the show, but it always frustrates me when people will say that they don't like a particular broadcaster, and they'll say, well, I don't like, we'll use a common one that people don't really like, Joe Buck. I don't like Joe Buck. And I'll say, well, who do you like? And they'll say, well, I like Chris Collinsworth. And I'll say, well, but he's not the same. He's not the same role. He's not the same position. And they can't even name another play-by-play guy. So it's fun to talk about these different play-by-play guys. But tell me about your experiences with these guys. So how have you gotten a chance to work with both of them?
So Brian, I got to know him actually, believe it or not, within the last couple of years. So that has been a fast-growing friendship as the last couple of years have gone on. And so it just basically started when the Whitecaps were playing on the road in Wisconsin a couple of years ago. And I ended up just driving over to, I believe it's American Family Field, Miller Park is what I think we all just know it as. But I went over there for a Brewers game, actually stayed for a second one the following afternoon, and BA was in the booth, and I think we just kind of crossed paths in the cafeteria or whatever it was, and we just sort of hit it off. And as time has gone on, it's gotten to the point where now I'm able to actually help him do some of his prep for his broadcast. So one of the coolest moments was he was on the call for when the Tigers beat the Guardians. I want to say it was Game 2 in Cleveland last year of the ALDS. It was a game that Kerry Carpenter hit the home run off Emmanuel Clase. And I had given BA a sheet, essentially with just some little nugget on just about every single Tigers player, ones that I had gotten over the years that maybe just weren't talked about a lot, but would make for a really good storyline. And I remembered that my blurb for Kerry Carpenter was that he used to work at Dick's Sporting Goods. And as he came back from his commercial break, he immediately mentioned Dick's Sporting Goods as he was talking about Kerry Carpenter, as he was crossing home plate on the replay. And I swear, if there could have been that moment, that picture of Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the television from his recliner at home?
Yep.
That was me in that moment. And later that night, I got a text, and it was him saying thanks for that, and, all that good stuff. And it was just super cool to watch all that kind of come together. So, he's also a broadcast professor. He also does some help at Marquette. So he's just a great teacher. And even though I've only known him for a handful of years now, I've just learned so much.
Yeah, that's cool to hear, because collaboration and production is so important in that industry as a whole. So you want to make sure to put the best broadcasts out there. So it's nice to hear people working together in that industry. So that's cool to hear, because he's always one that I've liked. What about Harlan? How did you cross paths with him?
So Harlan was a little bit more recent. This was over the course of the past year now, and so met him at a conference, and as we were talking, there's one of his broadcast crew, one of the members of that crew, his sideline reporter, Allie LaForce, her and her husband are very big advocates for a certain cause, the Huntington's Disease Society of America. And that's a cause that's really important to our family. We lost my father-in-law a handful of years ago due to that disease. So basically, Kevin was able to put us in touch with Allie, with that family, and just allow us to continue to help their advocacy. Because, one of the cool things about being able to do what we do is that we do have a platform. We do have a way that we can affect change. So, trying to help raise money for that is something that really matters a lot. And Kevin was a big part of that. And since that happened, I've been able to continue chatting with him, and he's listened to some of my stuff, and we've had a chance to kind of get to know each other over the course of the last year. It's one of the best parts of what we do.
Definitely, that's cool. That's a cool story. He definitely seems like one of those guys that would do things like that. He's very authentic, and that shows through. I've heard a lot of interviews with him too, and he's very good in those as well. I want to ask you about one other guy that he's not a play-by-play guy, obviously, but guy that you've worked with before and had a very good reputation. Unfortunately, we lost him, but I wanted to ask you about Earl Cureton.
Oh yeah, I mean Earl. So Earl, that one stung because Earl, first of all, was everything that was right and is right about team sport. I mean, he was the ultimate support for whatever role he was in. Whether he was as an NBA player, he was always sort of like the 8th or 9th guy in the rotation, but he always played. They trusted him, and he was always there when you needed him. And he took that into his post-career, his post-playing career. And no matter what he was doing, if he was helping out, local churches and schools, trying to help with kids, wanting to raise money for them so they could play sports. He did a great job at St. Cecilia's in Detroit. They actually named the street after him a couple of weeks ago. But I got to actually call Earl's last game with him the day before he passed. And that was, that's just one of the more bizarre things. I remember when we found out that we had lost him, a lot of times we go and we make a tribute, right? Like a lot of the times when we lose somebody close to us, we go put together a tribute, whether it's social media or whatever medium that is. And I remember when I went to go make mine, and I went to go look for a picture of the two of us so I could use it. Well, you know how when you pull up your photos on your phone and it shows you the recent photos? Well, the most recent photo I had taken was with him and I. And it was just another kind of just a shock to the system to realize that we lost somebody that was literally the most recent photo that I had taken. And so, he was so much bigger than his contributions as a player. And he really was the best extension of the University of Detroit Mercy, especially from a sporting aspect. So we certainly miss him a lot.
Yeah, and I remember that the Pistons game that was after he had passed, and that those were some of the same sentiments that Greg Kelser especially had, because you could tell how revered he was by everybody in the organization. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on working with him, because I figured it would be a very positive experience. He seemed like a very good team guy and had good commentary as well. So that was a sad loss, but it's good that you got a chance to work with him and have that experience, as a lot of people I'm sure were benefited by him here. But yeah, so you still have that going. We got to watch out for you on the rise. So is somebody covering for you on the rise then here? You said you're mainly focused on baseball.
The way that it works is, the rise, their matches are a little more few and far between, and we do play-by-play for their home games, their home matches on radio, and occasionally on television, depending on what they're broadcasting on. So what we'll do is, as it pertains to baseball season, I'll kind of dip over to volleyball as they play, because of course their games are so few and far between. There even is a day coming up here this Saturday where the Whitecaps play at 2 and the Rise play at 7. So it's going to be a very, very busy day for some of us.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Well, be sure to catch Dan at all his various locations. Is there anywhere else we should direct people here to find you? I mentioned your website, danhasty.com. Anywhere else for the fans to be aware of you?
Just genuinely, whitecapsbaseball.com. I mean, to go to the Whitecaps website, because, when it comes down to the roster that the Whitecaps are going to have, I can tell you that I don't think they're going to be in West Michigan for long. So if you want to come out and you want to see some of the guys that you will clearly get that same chance to see, but in Detroit in the years ahead, I don't know how long we're going to be able to keep some of these guys. So make sure you make it a point and go online, whitecapsbaseball.com, and that allows you to go get tickets for whether it's opening night coming up on Friday or any of the games in the early portion of the season, because that's as much as we know when it pertains to us being able to keep these guys, and nothing else beyond that is a guarantee. So if you want to see them, now's the time.
Yeah, there's certainly a few guys that are projected to be on the roster that might even be seen in the major leagues by the end of the year. So definitely a lot of talent in the farm system here. But appreciate you talking with us about your career and everything you have going on. And we'll look forward to getting you back on when you can fit us in. But thanks for being on the show, Dan.
Happy to do it, Ryan. Anytime.
All right, take care. All right, thanks to Dan Hasty. Good stuff there about the Whitecaps. We're going to keep on baseball here. We're going to talk about the Major League team because they just debuted here. And no better person to do it with than Lance Parrish, former catcher for the Tigers, all-star catcher. So we'll bring him on after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to bring on the big wheel, Lance Parrish. We've talked about both of his books, but now I want to talk about the current day roster. I'm sure we'll talk about some things from his day as well, but got to analyze this roster. We just had the opening weekend here. What'd you think of that first series, Lance? That was a tough opponent here. I'm curious to get some of your thoughts on the Dodgers as well, because they're creating a super team over there.
Yeah, they sure are, aren't they? I thought the Tigers played pretty well. I mean, obviously not good enough to win, and that's basically what it comes down to. But I thought they battled all the way through, and I liked what I saw. I think they are, going to be a very competitive team throughout the year. I mean, you go up against defending world champions, it's never going to be easy, especially the team that they put together. I mean, it's it's a pretty amazing lineup and pitching staff that they have. But I thought the Tigers never look like they were intimidated, and they gave them a battle each and every day. So I like what I saw. So we're 0-3, but we move on. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I feel like obviously it's about the wins and losses, but I do feel like those were good performances, especially for some of the early injuries, because they're trying to cobble together this lineup. Usually you're not having to deal with this many injuries at this point in the year, but the outfield is pretty cobbled together right now, and they're getting the pitching rotation going. They've got a lot of pitching depth, which is good, but the Dodgers are going to be tough. I wondered, knowing that I would be talking with you today and watching the opening series, I thought, I wonder how somebody that obviously was a very skilled player, multiple-time All-Star, good at multiple facets of the game. You, as a catcher, you have to do so many different things. You have to call the game. You're a great hitter, great fielder, all of that. What do you do with somebody like Shohei Ohtani? Because it's amazing how many different talents he has combined in one person. He's like 3 or 4 players in one.
Exactly. Well, the good thing is he's not pitching yet, and the Tigers didn't have to face him. I mean, of all of his offensive exploits, which are, amazing in themselves, he's also a pretty dang good pitcher. So I imagine when his arm comes around and he's able to contribute that way, he's even going to be more dynamic on that Dodger lineup. But, I feel like, when I was playing with the Tigers and Sparky Anderson was managing, he always seemingly picked one guy out of the lineup on every team and said, I don't want this guy to beat me. You know, if we have to pitch around this guy, if we have to walk him, whatever we have to do, this is the guy that I do not want to beat me. And, you know, obviously you can point to Ohtani in that lineup and say that about him, but, you know, they've got some other bats in the lineup that are pretty dang good as well. But, you know, you know, for me, it's like if we were to play Kansas City and George Brett was the guy that Sparky would say, you know, situation comes up, I don't want this guy beating me. And if I have to walk him, I will intentionally, which he did a number of times. But, you know, more than anything, we probably just pitched around him. And I think, you know, you pick out a zone and you keep the ball down and away, or you know, if you can paint 3 pitches on the outside corner down to the knees, and you can get him out that way, great. If you end up walking him, okay, well, whatever. You know, honestly, I like if the pitchers do their job, I like our chances, you know, with our catchers, Jake and Dylan behind the plate, of throwing him out if he tries to steal. So, you know, for me, I don't want him hitting any long balls off me, but you know, if he ends up, you know, walking or you know, hitting a single here or there, great. But that's the one guy that I would not want to give the opportunity to put the ball in the seats on a regular basis and beat me in multiple games.
Definitely, yeah. I thought they pitched him pretty well overall, but it's also tough because it's a great point that you do have usually that one guy in the lineup that you say, okay, we're not going to mess with this guy here. But man, that Dodgers lineup is pretty packed, so you don't deal with him, and then you've got to deal with Freddie Freeman and Hernandez and a bunch of the other guys there. So it is. You know, Betts is, you know,
it seemed like he was out the entire spring training, and then he comes back and he's like, you know, house on fire. You know, he's just an amazing hitter as well. So there's a lot of, you know, really great hitters in that lineup, and you know, he's just got to roll the dice though. You know, if the other guys beat you, they beat you. But you know, like I say, Ohtani would be the one guy that I think if you could avoid pitching to him, you know, I would anyway.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think you have the right idea there, especially right now. Yeah, Betts. Speaking of Betts, yeah, he had a great series, and especially for, I think they said he lost 17 pounds with the issue that he had overseas. So he still didn't lose any power apparently with that weight there. But yeah, it's a stacked lineup overall. But you hit on a point with the pitching with Ohtani that at least they were able to avoid that. But I'm curious, he didn't run much in the series. Talked about the catcher's ability to throw him out, but he didn't run much. I'm curious how much he's going to run, because that was one thing that was very interesting last year, that since he wasn't doing the pitching, it was like, man, I didn't see this necessarily as a 50-50 guy, and then he showed us that skill. So it'll be interesting to see how much he runs this year, especially once he gets back on the mound.
Well, you know, I don't think there'll be, you know, let's put it this way. If he does get back on the mound, I don't think it, you know, might not be in his best interest to run as much as he did last year, especially when he hurt his shoulder sliding. Maybe they need to work on him with a different technique in sliding. But, you know, as far as being able to get good reads and good jumps and all that, you know, he's very, very good at that. For a big guy, he does everything very well. But I think, you know, because of the injury that he had last year, and because, you know, if he does get back on the mound, I think that he, you know, running bases is very taxing, and I think, you know, 60 stolen bases, 59 stolen bases, whatever he had, it just might take a little more out of him than they would really like to see.
Yeah, and it is amazing that he just has so much access to all of those different skills, and then you kind of have to pick and choose with him. But it'll be interesting to see how he comes back to the mound. But I want to talk about the pitching staff of the Tigers, because I think that's one place where obviously the pitching was very good last year with the whole pitching chaos strategy, but now the rotation is really strong. They got Flaherty back. And what do you see in, obviously we haven't seen everybody start yet. We're not one turn through the rotation yet, but we saw some of the arms in spring training. You've got to be excited about some of these young arms on the team here.
Well, I am, and I was last year. And, you know, the interesting thing last year was amazingly, how many guys, that we lost to injury at, different times. So for me, and, everybody always asks, what were some of the key ingredients you guys won in '84? Well, one of the big things was we were able to stay healthy for the most part. And even though they do have a very young, talented, starting rotation, the objective, I think, going in would be to try to keep everybody healthy and on the mound and in the rotation. I like the guys that AJ selected to start for them this season. I think Casey Mize is going to step up. I'm anxious to see how Jackson does tonight, and I know that they have a lot of confidence in him, and he obviously has great ability. But it's his first time around, and even though he got to pitch a little bit last year and get his feet wet, this is a little different situation where you're in rotation on a regular basis at the major league level. So he's going to see, a steady diet of pretty dang good hitting. So we'll just see how he adjusts. But, I have all the confidence in the world in him, and I think he'll do a good job. But, Scoobo, not worried about him. Flaherty, I'm not worried about him. Reese, I thought, stepped up when he was healthy last year and really looked good. So for me, the ability's there. I think, we have the potential to have a very strong rotation, starting rotation. And again, like I say, if they can stay healthy and hopefully stay consistent, they should really be a contributing factor to the success of this team this year.
Yeah, I'm with you, especially on Mize, because I feel like they have two players that are like that, one on the pitching side and one on the batting side, with Mize and Torkelson, where they both had a lot of expectations because of where they were taken, and then didn't meet those expectations for various reasons. But now they're just part of the team. Mize isn't at the top of the rotation. He's one of the guys. Torkelson isn't supposed to be carrying the lineup. It was borderline whether or not he was even going to make the major league roster. And now that he's there, he seems to be playing loose. I'm expecting the same thing out of Mize, because I feel like both of those guys could be poised for good seasons now that the expectations have lowered a bit for them.
Well, I think that with the fanfare that Casey came into the organization with, and he's obviously had some issues, health issues. He hasn't pitched the way he would have liked, even when he was healthy. I think he's, if I had to guess, he's pitching with a chip on his shoulder this year because he's got something to prove. And now that he's healthy and hopefully he stays healthy, I think each and every time he takes the ball and goes out to the mound, he has something that he wants to prove, not only to the Tiger organization, but everybody else around the league, that he is a top-quality pitcher. So, I look forward to that. I hope he's got a little bulldog in him, and that he just bows up every time he goes out there and does the job that's expected of him. I think he can, and he's obviously got really good stuff. So again, it's in the case of everybody, from as good as Tarek Skubal is and as good as Flaherty is, and everybody else on down the line, I believe that they all are very talented. It's just a matter of going out and getting it done on a consistent basis. Again, I reflect back to '84, and we had Wilcox and Petrie and Morris and, a few guys that, spot started here and there. Those guys went out and, they were just consistent. They just got the job done. I think, they created a little momentum for themselves. I think that once we started the way that we started, I think that put a lot of confidence in everybody, and especially those guys. So our pitching staff stepped up. And that wasn't just our starting staff. It was from top to bottom, from Jack Morris at the top of the starting rotation all the way through our bullpen. Everybody stepped up and did a great job. So the Tigers want to be successful. That's what it's going to take. And, I look at the names that they opted to go north with, and I like them all. I will say that I'm a little surprised that Jason Foley didn't make the staff, but I expect that at some point early in the season he will rejoin the Tigers. I just think he's got an amazing arm, so hopefully he figures things out and figures them out to their liking, and he gets back up to Detroit.
I'm with you. That was one thing that was evident, that there is a lot of depth in this pitching staff, because there were a few cuts that I was surprised by as well, and that was one of them, certainly, because yeah, he was pretty strong for them, and he's got a nice live arm, like you said. So it's nice to have that depth, but you got to think that we'll be seeing him at some point with some of the injuries and as the season ebbs and flows here. But great stuff from Lance so far. We're going to come back with him after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to come back here with Big Wheel, Lance Parrish. Now, we were talking about your 84 team, and you always give great analysis when you come on the show. I'm curious what you think of. Obviously, we saw Gibby throwing out the first pitch for one of the games. We see Petrie is a featured analyst this year. You have very good analysis of the games. Have you thought about going into that? I know you've had a lot of post-baseball roles as manager and different things, but is that something that ever appealed to you?
Well, I actually was in the TV booth for one of the years. The last year that they, I think, had games on network TV. I partnered up with, I can't think of his name right now. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, I did do that, and it was like a 50-game package. And, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I was a color guy. I got to, put my 2 cents in there for, whatever it was worth, and got to tell a few stories about, different things that went on throughout the course of my career that pertained to actually what was going on in the field. So, it's always nice to be able to watch the game and be able to draw, from your own career in similar situations, things that might have happened that were actually happening on the field at the present time. And, it was just a fun opportunity for me. But, would I do it again? I would consider it. But, I think the guys that they have are doing a great job. Petrie does a great job. Andy Dirks does a great job. Love listening to Dickerson and, the whole crew that they have. It's just been a lot of fun. So, I just sit back and enjoy, and I'm available to do what the Tigers asked me to do. So it's all good.
Yeah, it is a good crew right now. I just was curious about that. I thought you had a little bit of time, because obviously you do have great analysis.
Frank Beckman.
Who was it?
Just popped into my head. Frank Beckman.
Okay, I was trying to look it up.
I couldn't think of his name. That's what happens when you get old. Things don't come to you as quick as you want them to. But, obviously Frank was, broadcasting and doing WJR and all that in Detroit forever and covering multiple sports. So he was a lot of fun to work with, and, I had a great time with him. I think that was the last year, actually, that they did network TV package, a network TV package, before they jumped onto cable and just did all cable games.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, it is interesting how it's all changed. It's continuing to change here. It seems like it's getting tougher to even find the games here, but they've done a good job of I know they kind of I think they moved Benetti over to being employed directly by the team rather than FanDuel, and trying to adjust all those things. But yeah, I think they've done a good job with that crew. But you'd be a nice addition if you were ever called back up to that. But I'd be remiss to not ask you, being one of the best catchers in the Tigers history here, about the current catchers. We talked about Rogers a little bit on one of your previous appearances, but this seems like one of the better catcher combos, because it does come down back in your day. It seemed like one catcher usually dominated the time there. Now it seems like they do still have those types of catchers, but it's about the catcher duo, and this seems like one of the better duos with Rogers and Dingler. But I wanted to get kind of your scouting analysis on each one of them here.
Well, both of them are excellent defensive catchers. I mean, I watched Jake grow over the years. I was probably a little more critical of him the first year I saw him come up with the Tigers, and I thought he might have been a little lackadaisical at times, and I think somebody got in his ear and straightened that out. And, ever since then, he's just been amazing. I love watching him. I think he's totally bought into the program that AJ has laid out for him. He does a great job calling games, working with his pitching staff. He's got a great arm. Every time somebody gets on, I hope they run because I think Jake has the ability to throw everybody out. So, it's fun watching him do that. And, Dylan's the same way. Obviously Dylan took a little bit longer to get to the big leagues than I originally thought, but, sometimes it takes a little longer for that bat to come around. And, he's starting to show signs of, putting the bat on the ball a little bit more consistently. Jake's comes up with some big home runs when they need them. The deal is if you want to be an everyday catcher, you just have to hit consistently. Whether it's you're a consistent power threat and you drive in runs, or you have a pretty good batting average and put some balls in the seats on occasion. But that really is the ticket that gets you the number one job on the ball club. So for whatever reason or whatever decision making that goes into this, with them platooning and switching off here and there, I think that AJ's working them great. I think they both have responded really well. Again, I think you'd be hard pressed to find better defensive catchers in the major leagues, period. You could go from team to team. I just think they're both that good. But, if either one of them wants to snatch that starting job from the other one on a regular basis, just got to be a little bit more consistent with the bat, and maybe this will be the year that somebody steps up and does just that.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of hope amongst the experts and analysts here for Dingler, like you mentioned, because people were high on him during spring training, and he looked like he had figured some things out. And obviously, he's younger, so his trajectory is a little bit different there. But I also feel like he's going to benefit from learning from Jake Rogers too, because he has the athletic profile combined with learning from a very good defensive mindset catcher, and I feel like that could kind of. And Rogers would be fine, I'm sure, because he's a team guy, but he could kind of be the architect of his own destruction there, because he could help Dingler become the everyday catcher by kind of tying up some of those loose ends to go with his athletic profile, because you don't hear about potentially putting a catcher in the outfield, and that's what they've flirted with the outfield issues here so far.
Well, it seems like the more that I watch them, it's, everybody, with the exception of a few, it seems like they're trying to make all of them super utility guys and just see what they're capable of doing and if they can play this position and that position. And I guess it doesn't hurt to find out if need be, I can, move somebody from behind the plate to the outfield. Or, I know they did it with Eric Haas when he was here. And, he was able to handle that. But, they're both good athletes. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do it if they worked at it a little bit in pregame stuff, or maybe they did work on it down in spring training. I don't know. But I do know that AJ is always looking at multiple areas for everybody, so he can mix and match and move people around. And in emergencies, he feels confident he's got somebody to plug a hole. So, I guess I can appreciate that. I've never had to do that, so I don't know how difficult it really is for somebody to go from one position one day to another position the next day, or in the middle of the game switch over to. I used to do it in high school, and I guess I didn't have too much trouble doing it then. But doing it at the major league level is a little bit different. But the guys that he's got out there playing multiple positions all seem to be able to handle it pretty well. So, he's doing a great job with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it is a nice combo. I also hear what you're saying about Rogers, too, because he's definitely one of my favorites on this team because of he's clearly one of the clubhouse leaders, and even though his overall average isn't as high as maybe some would like it's also the case, at least for me when I'm watching, when he comes up in a clutch situation, you do have confidence in him, even if the numbers overall aren't in his favor.
Well, he's dangerous. When I watch him, I think, it doesn't really matter to me who's pitching. I know if they make a mistake, he's very capable of putting up the seats or driving in the gap. I mean, consistently it might not happen for him the way he would like to, but I know every time he steps up to the plate, he's got a chance of doing some damage. So, I just enjoy watching him. He's fun to watch, and like you said, he's got a great personality. I think he's great for the team, great for the clubhouse. He's a take-charge guy, and he's just an extremely solid defensive player behind the plate, and they're fortunate to have him.
Well, and he's continuing the storied tradition of the Tigers catchers with mustaches, too. So you have to like that.
He's got a good mustache, I'll say that.
It's a strong one. He clearly works on that one. But yeah, I figured you'd like that. But Lance, really appreciate you coming on the show. It was great analysis, and appreciate you making time for us, and we'll look forward to having you back on as the season progresses here.
You bet. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.
All righty.
All right, thanks to Lance Parrish. Great stuff as usual. Even got a laugh out of him with the mustache thing, so that was good. But we're going to turn our attention to football, not the Lions. We'll be doing that in a couple weeks here, but we're going to talk the UFL and the Michigan Panthers and everything UFL, because that's an interesting spring football option for people. So we'll be talking to James Larson about that after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. We've been talking baseball. We're going to talk a little football here. We're going to be talking about the Lions once we get to the draft. But I wanted to talk about the UFL a little bit, especially we've got a local team, got the Michigan Panthers in the UFL, and they're doing some interesting stuff, and there's no better guy to talk to about all things UFL than James Larson. So welcome to the show, James.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, excited to have you on here. I wanted to cover this. I'm interested in the old USFL, the XFL. I like that they're combining those elements, and I'm always interested in kind of the origins and the deeper things in sports. And the UFL is interesting to watch because you can kind of see some things develop there. For Lions fans, you might say, well, I'm focused on the Lions, but there's a few figures that came from somewhere in the XFL, USFL, UFL universe. Obviously, Jake Bates was the big story coming to the Lions as the kicker there, and then also their offensive coordinator John Morton was in those teams. I believe he was in the XFL side of things, and he got his first offensive coordinator job there. So it's interesting to watch these guys progress. So I'm excited to talk about some of those guys. And I watched the Michigan Panthers game opening weekend, and they're clearly putting a lot of resources into the production of this year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, ESPN and Fox are both big stakeholders in this league, and they have a lot of say, in what happens with spring football, right? If the broadcast isn't professional and isn't good and isn't something that keeps people entertained, nobody's going to tune in. So having that presence of ESPN and Fox both involved is really huge for the league. And, to kind of bounce off of what you were talking about with how this league has helped guys get to the NFL, including Detroit. We talk about Jake Bates, obviously such a huge success story going from the Michigan Panthers to Detroit, but also Bruce Gradkowski, the offensive coordinator for the St. Louis Battlehawks the last couple of years. He's joining your offensive staff with Dan Campbell. So that's pretty exciting on his end, and just goes to show this league is here to stay and is here to help these guys get to the next level.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the cool elements of the league is they're clearly there's a lot of passion for this league. So because there might be people that say, well, okay, I get a lot of football from the NFL season, but these people clearly care about the league. Like you said, there's TV partners that care, but the guys care because they're all playing like it's their last chance kind of thing, trying to make it back to the league or trying to play some version of professional football. So you get some pretty competitive games, including that Michigan Panthers game. That was quite the game, and you got to see a lot of another thing that I think is kind of an origin part of this whole thing is some of the rules that are adopted by the NFL are tried out in the UFL, and then the NFL tends to adopt them, and they've got some interesting rule differences in the UFL here.
Absolutely. We look at the kickoff and how the NFL is now adopting that basically as their main kickoff moving forward. That was an innovation that came from the XFL back in 2020, and spring football has stuck with it over the last few years, and now we're seeing the NFL benefit from it. And there's a couple of reasons why it's so beneficial. Is on one hand, you have more returns, right? I think the kickoff is something that's been taken out of the game a little bit with the line of scrimmage moving up for the kickers, and kickers getting stronger legs and they can just boot it out of the end zone. But the kickoff is a really exciting play. I mean, I grew up watching Devin Hester return kicks for the Chicago Bears and just the excitement that he brought to the game. And, it's something that fans love to see. And a couple years ago, I was at a USFL game and I was hanging out with some fans afterwards, and they were like, man, like we love how this league emphasizes making sure that the kickoff is still a part of the game. So having that aspect of it, I think, is big for the league, and we're seeing the NFL pick up on it. Now, what I'd love to see the NFL do is also maybe take a play out of the playbook of the UFL and let's get some changes to the officiating, right? With the UFL, they have chips in the balls, and they have, different things that allow you to measure the ball virtually, like with technology, and the refs actually don't have to, make an on-the-spot call. You can go to review and see if the measurement is actually a first down or not. We see so many times where, I'm sure you remember many times in Detroit Lions history where the team has been shorted on a fourth down call or something like that. So bringing those innovations to the NFL, I think, will only help grow the game of football.
Oh, yeah, I think you make a great point there, because it is kind of funny with all the technology that we have, the tracking technology for the players and all the technology that's involved in the game, that we still have two referees on opposing sidelines that run out and try to spot that ball with all that chaos, all the bodies in there. It's funny to me that that's how we spot the ball, because that's a very imperfect process. And I do think that they have some issues with the refereeing in general and how they train them and how they develop them. It does seem different in the UFL, which was interesting to me. But I do kind of side with them in situations like that, because it's like, how are they supposed to see that? You can't see that the ball, if you've got a running play, that then they're getting tackled by three different guys, and then you're supposed to be able to spot that ball cleanly. If you can have the help of some technology, I feel like that would improve the game, especially if it's help where the technology, I think where people get their eyes kind of glaze over a little bit, is when it affects the viewing experience. Like, okay, here's another review. We've got to take another 5-minute break. If you don't have to do that, but you can use technology to your advantage, why not do it?
Absolutely. In the UFL, they make it as seamless as possible, right? Where they have so many people working behind the scenes to make sure that things go as smoothly as possible and as quickly and efficiently as possible, because they know that people aren't going to sit around waiting for long reviews. And I think that's another thing that makes it so intriguing, is that you have like Dean Blandino and Mike Pereira, who are a couple of the best rules analysts in the football scene in general, who work with the NFL, obviously, but they're a big part of the UFL and making sure that not only are the rules, efficient and new and innovative, but they're there watching the games from their command center and making sure they can call out. Sometimes we'll see them from the command center call out the ref and be like, hey, no, this is actually the correct call. This is what we need to do, or the ball should actually be placed here. Not to mention, we also have the Super Challenge, where a coach can challenge literally anything on the field. We saw Michigan take advantage of that this past Sunday, where Mike Nolan used a Super Challenge, and they were able to get a penalty on Memphis, and it ended up resulting in Michigan forcing them to not score touchdowns. So those are some really important changes and innovations that the league has taken advantage of, and we'll see what the NFL chooses to adopt. But for those looking to watch more football and maybe to get a bit of a different, look in and view into how professional football works, the UFL provides that for them.
Definitely. Yeah, that transparency that you're alluding to with both the officiating piece and just listening in on the play calls and the thoughts behind the play calls. They were interviewing the coordinators during the game. That was all very interesting, because usually you're seeing in the NFL version of that, you're seeing, okay, I can't even have people reading my lips. I've got to hold up the play card to my face, and they can't hear anything. It was almost like you were hearing too many things during the UFL games, because you could hear the officials, you could hear the coaches, you could hear a lot of different audio, and that was very interesting to me as a whole. And I also I don't know if this was the case in the other games, but in the Panthers game, I found it interesting. I know it was Mike Nolan. He's a very experienced coach, and then they had the guy on the other side that's former. I think he's a former Marine, former military guy, and so that was maybe a byproduct of the coaches that they had. But it also seemed like the format led to a better discourse between the coaches and the officials, and I found that byproduct interesting as well.
No, without a doubt. I mean, the coaches, the way the league works with them, and make sure that this process is as seamless for them as possible. Another thing that I thought was unique is we got to hear the coaches speak to the announcers, the broadcasters during the game. I don't know if you caught that part a couple times. We had Nolan and Jim Turner speaking with the broadcasters over there on ESPN. We got to get their insight on the game as it was going. So, like, those sorts of innovations, that type of transparency is something that makes this league so different and makes it so enticing for football fans, especially here in the spring when they don't have pro football,
Oh yeah, I did see that, and because I watched the Panthers game in its entirety, and usually I have a tendency to speed through games. I watch a lot of games for the show, so I'm speeding through commercials, I'm speeding through low points in the game. I did that a lot less in the UFL. Part of that was making sure I was prepared and seeing a full game, but the other part was you're constantly being entertained, even if there's a quote unquote slow part of the game. They're sending you to something else. They have somebody on both sidelines, so then they're interviewing different people there. They really bounce around. They're interviewing the coaches from the booth, as you said, and they've got really good teams on these games. I saw that Tessitore was on the Panthers game, and then Mark Jones was on the afternoon game that day. They're allocating a lot of resources to these games.
Without a doubt, and again, it goes back to Fox and ESPN and the backing that they have for this league. They know that spring football has so much potential. We saw it back in 2020 with the XFL when Vince McMahon brought it back, and now we have new ownership. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is involved, Danny Garcia is involved, Redbird Capital, and then, of course, Fox Sports and the rest of that crew at ESPN. So having all of that backing behind this league and seeing the fan engagement and seeing the potential for spring football to really solidify itself as a mainstay in the spring sports scene, it's exciting, and I think it speaks volumes to the product that the UFL is putting on the field.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's one reason I wanted to cover it here, and there's some other aspects of it that I want to talk about. We've got to take a quick break here, but this has been great stuff from James so far, so stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with James Larson of the Pro Football Network here, giving us some great stuff on the UFL. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things. I figured we would be talking more about some of the players and the transactions, but the production is really what interested me. And I'm wondering, there's another piece. We were talking about the kickoffs, and I want to go back to that because you mentioned that they adopted the kickoff in the NFL, and now I see that the UFL is kicking from further back. I'm wondering if that's going to be something that will be adopted in the NFL. And I'm with you. I like the idea of the kickoffs. I like having the kickoffs back in. Another thing that I think they've got to change at some point is the onside kick rule, because I know they're trying to protect players, and that's important. But at the same time, it really took the air out of that element of the game, I think, this year, especially watching a lot of Lions games. That was a strategic thing that Campbell used to use, and then they totally took that out of his wheelhouse here. But I'm wondering if the NFL will adopt the UFL rule, because that deep fourth down was very interesting, and we saw one in the Panthers game.
Yeah, that fourth down innovation has been something we've seen in spring football the last few years, and I'm a big fan of it. I feel like, maybe on the NFL side, if you don't want to fully adopt it, give teams a chance to have something similar and then also give them an opportunity to have an onside kick. But like you said, we literally saw that happen yesterday, and Michigan looked like they had stopped Memphis on the play, but then a penalty allowed Memphis to keep the ball, and they started going down the field, and we had a really exciting finish. But it's one of those things where last year in the UFL, we saw it time and time again. It makes me think of a game I got to see live. I went down to Arlington, Texas, and I watched the D.C. Defenders take on the Arlington Renegades, and the Renegades had a 28-18 lead or something along those lines with less than a minute to go. D.C. scored a touchdown, got the 2-point conversion. Then instead of doing the onside kick, they have the 4th and 12 opportunity. They convert, they get into field goal range, and they walk it off 29-28 with a long field goal from Matt McCray, and then everybody went crazy. But, it's those sorts of exciting things that you see in the UFL that you can't really see in the NFL right now because that rule doesn't exist. So I think it's a really neat innovation, and again, it goes back to Russ Brandon and Darryl Johnson and everyone else involved with the executive leadership in this league, making sure the UFL differentiates itself enough from the NFL and the product that we see during the fall.
Yeah, I think they did a good job with that because I watch a ton of NFL games, and it really did feel like a different experience. And I know that that was a clear emphasis because you could tell by the way that Tessitore was talking that he was really trying to emphasize that. But it probably helps too that this, you alluded to some of the names that have been part of these leagues, especially the XFL piece that was started by Vince McMahon and now taken over by Dwayne Johnson. There's a lot of wrestling connections with that, and now Tessitore has one foot in either camp, and that was interesting to me because I felt like he was kind of half in his sports professional broadcaster voice, but then partially in his I'm selling this from a professional wrestling standpoint voice too.
Without a doubt, I thought Tessitore did a phenomenal job calling the game, and having someone of his caliber, in the booth, it just adds legitimacy to the league. When you don't have, because in times past in spring football, we've seen leagues, the broadcasters, whether it's ESPN or Fox, they kind of put some of their lesser-known names out there. Let's give somebody some experience, and let's throw them into spring football because who's going to be watching that anyway? But now, with them taking the UFL so seriously, we're actually getting some of the big announcers like Mark Jones in spring football. That's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And on Fox's side, you have Joel Klatt, who's one of the all-time names and as a college and football announcer. So having those types of names in this scene, I think, is really, really helpful. And again, it goes to show this league is legitimate. They have legitimate coverage, and it's here to stay.
Oh yeah, I didn't know Klatt was in there. Is he paired? Do they have Gus Johnson on that side too, or is he paired with somebody else?
Unfortunately, he's not paired with Gus Johnson. He's paired with Kurt Menefee, who's been one of the lead broadcasters for Fox Sports in the USFL and the UFL. So Kurt and Joe Klatt are a team. They also have Brock Hewer with them.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, that is an interesting team with Menefee and Klatt. That's there's so many things to like about the league. The one of the other kind of rule, you alluded to it with the 2-point conversion, but I really found that staggered 1, 2, 3 extra point scenario for those that haven't seen it. Basically, there's no kicking an extra point. You go for 1 point, 2 points, or 3 points based on the distance away from the end zone. And that was interesting too, because like you said, you can have a 10-point game, and between the deep fourth down, the 4th and 12, and the ability to go for 1, 2, or 3, you can close that distance really quickly. So you're keeping people there until the end.
Absolutely. I'll go back to last year for another example. In Week 7, San Antonio and Houston were facing off, and the Roughnecks, they had a commanding lead basically the whole game. They're up 12-3 with a couple minutes left. San Antonio was able to score a touchdown, convert the 3-point try, so they tied it up at 12. And then on the kickoff, Houston fumbled the ball away. San Antonio was able to kick a game-winning field goal. So even though Houston kind of controlled the entire game, within 3 minutes, San Antonio took the lead and ended up winning the game. So again, it's those sorts of innovations that make this game exciting, gives the league, it gives the fans something to talk about, and gives the league something to show and be like, hey, this is what we're doing different. Here's why it's working, and here's why you should be paying attention to it.
Definitely. And then there's other things that I'd like to talk about, but we have time kind of for one more question. The other thing that I found really interesting is because I'm in my 40s, and so I'm not super old school about this, but I remember the time. It always is apparent to me when I watch Al Michaels, because Al Michaels has been around for so long that it used to be something where you couldn't mention anything to do with gambling, and then he would kind of sneak it in, and then you can tell he has a hard time talking about gambling so openly now that it's no longer kind of a whispered secret. But it was interesting to see how integrated it was in these games, where they're saying that it's another thing that I feel like is keeping you on the broadcast, because even when the game did get too far out of hand, where it was clear that Michigan was not going to lose that, then they're highlighting the fact that the extra point was basically the difference between the over and the under, and it was just interesting to watch a game that highlighted that so much.
Yeah, ESPN has really leaned into that side of things. So if you watch a Fox Sports UFL broadcast, they highlight it a little bit here and there, but it's a lot less. ESPN really takes you to a whole new level with ESPN Bet, and obviously a lot of the fan base in the spring football scene is a lot of people that just want to keep betting on football. And there's lots of options for them out there now as the league continues to grow. But ESPN bringing in Aaron Doran to also, have some gambling sections and segments during the game, I thought that was interesting. It's something new. We haven't really seen that in broadcasting before. And that's, again, it's why spring football is so important, because you have the ability to kind of test new things and, tread some new waters, see what works, see what doesn't work. So for ESPN, it's something that they've really loved to lean into since the XFL came back a couple years ago, and I think we'll see more of it this season.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch more of it, and James does a great job covering it. You can tell how much he knows about it. Tell the people where they can find you on the various platforms here, James.
Yeah, if you're on Twitter/X, I still call Twitter, but I know everyone's trying to call it X these days, but you can find me at James Larson PFN. That's where, I'm always breaking news and getting information out about the league and, keeping up to date with the players and what's going on every weekend, each game. And also I write for PF Newsroom, Pro Football Newsroom. So if you go to pfnewsroom.com, get all the news and anything you could really need in any space for spring football. So definitely go check those out.
And I was looking at your X profile, and I was seeing that there's the Pro Football Newsroom, and is there a UFL Newsroom as well?
Yes, sir, under the same umbrella, but yes, UFL Newsroom. You can go to uflnewsroom.com, and you'll get all of PF Newsroom's content UFL related.
Yeah, that's great stuff there, and hopefully we can get more people filling out those stadiums, because the stadiums were a little sad watching those. There weren't very many people in those seats.
I'm a little disappointed. I also think that the league should have done a bit of a better job scheduling different venues for the opening game. Like St. Louis is such a great market. Michigan has done decently well, and D.C. at least looks pretty good yesterday. But Memphis, Houston, a couple of these markets that have really been struggling, and that's something that the UFL really needs to sort out before it's too late.
Well, and I'm wondering, the attendance has got to probably go up, right, as the season goes on, because you've got less competition there as, the basketball seasons and other sports competition is reducing. So hopefully that will mean people will get out there, especially as the weather gets better in some of these markets and stuff too.
Well, without a doubt, and I think the key thing for the UFL is actually getting boots on the ground and marketing in these cities. That was something that was supposed to be more of an emphasis this off season, but certain decisions were made behind the scenes that, kind of hurt that a little bit, and there wasn't enough of an emphasis and a push on getting to these markets and actually, being out in the public, whether it's with coaches and players, bringing them in, or just, going out with mascots, getting billboards up, having little events. Those are the types of things that at the grassroots level can really help grow an alternative football league. So it's what the XFL has done really well the last couple of years. The UFL really needs to lean into that more. So I'm confident that they will, but let's hope that we actually can get there.
Definitely, yeah, and I'm excited to cover them more, and we'll definitely have you back on the show at some point to cover the UFL more, because it's interesting stuff, and we'll be following your coverage here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. Anytime.
Yeah, thanks, James. Appreciate it.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.